Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Dylan here, and today I'm going to be talking about how you can boost up your electrical system in your car, or if you just need to do any upgrades, or if you've been thinking about upgrading the electrical system for your car audio system. Well, this video should help you out a little bit. I don't know everything, but I'll try to give you as much knowledge as I know and tell you where to go from where you're at. Alright, here we go. First thing I'm going to be talking about is car audio wires, so let's get into this. Okay, so the first thing you want to know about buying wires is there is two kinds of wires. There's CCA and OFC. CCA wires are a aluminum core, so it's a copper-clad aluminum core wire, and OFC is oxygen-free copper, which is pure copper and is going to be a better wire. You'll get a better response, less resistance from a OFC wire than you will from CCA. CCA will be cheaper though, and the difference isn't great, but if you're pushing some high power, looking at OFC is kind of more what you want to do. Now the other thing you want to be thinking about when getting wire is what size you're using. If you're running low, the 500, 750, even 1000 watts, you can probably get away with using 4-gauge wire. Once you get to like 1500 watts RMS systems and around there, you might want to start looking at getting 0-gauge wires. Even if the amp you're using doesn't take 0-gauge, it's probably better just to run a 0-gauge line down and run from a 0 to 4-gauge reducer into your amp. And this will help you out a lot in the long run, and if you ever upgrade systems to a bigger amp, you'll already have 0-gauge wire there. And the reason you want to use a larger wire is that more current can flow through it easily, and there won't be as much resistance to the line. And if you use a lot smaller wire, like say you're using 4-gauge wire for ground and power, there's a chance you're going to be running so much power through that line that it's going to get really hot. It can melt the outer casing, and if that happens, it'll actually weld itself to the frame of your car and you won't be able to take the wire out. It could catch your car on fire. There's just a lot of things that you want to be careful with when you're dealing with speaker wire. So bigger is typically better, and OFC is better than CCA. Speaker wire I really like to use because a lot of people try to say they're selling 0-gauge wire when really it's a 0-gauge casing with 4-gauge wire inside, so you're actually not getting any more, and it normally costs more money than buying straight up 4-gauge wire. But a company I really like to use for speaker wire, Sky High Audio, they have really good wires, really flexible, it's true to size, if not even a little bit bigger. I always have a hard time getting their 0-gauge wires actually to fit into my amp, even if I sit there and spin the tip of my wire and try to jam it in there. It normally frays as it goes in. So they're definitely having at least 0-gauge wire. There's some other good companies out there, but I would really like to say Sky High Audio's done wonders for me and will probably help you out too. It's not the best, it can be a little expensive, but you get what you pay for in a lot of these circumstances. The other thing that goes with wire is not just running a big power and ground to your amplifier from your batteries, but another thing that can help if your lights are starting to dim in your car and it's just a little teeny flutter and you don't want to go through and buy a new alternator or a new battery, the other option is you can upgrade your big three, which is your alternator to ground, your engine to ground, and battery to ground. Every car is different. I'm not going to show you how to do it because it's really hard in my Mustang, but one of the easiest things you can do is go on YouTube and type in your model of car and big 3 upgrade, and someone's probably done it. The only cable you're probably going to have trouble finding is your engine to ground, which there's tons of ways you can ground out your engine. But just upgrading your big 3 will give you a lot better performance, and with more voltage from upgrading your big 3 going towards your amp, you're going to get more power to your sub and it will make it a little bit louder. But yeah, so that's pretty much what we need to know about wire. The next thing we're going to go to is alternators. So you're at that point where you're wondering if you should buy a new alternator. Well, if you got, the right size wires in there, your big 3 is upgraded, and you got a small little battery, and your lights are still dimming a little bit, and you're kind of in that range between you're starting to break in the 2000 watts RMS, you should probably start thinking about buying a new alternator. Most cars come stock with about 100 to 150 amp alternator, and that's not a lot of juice. When I was buying my new alternator, I talked to probably 4 or 5 different companies, and a lot of them were like, you should need at least 1 amp for every 10 watts your amp is. And it got kind of scary because I started looking at it. I had a 6500 watt RMS amplifier, and I was going to need 650 amps worth of juice going for my car, which means I was going to need to buy 2 alternators to power my 1 amp and 1 sub, which seemed like a lot of overkill, and it kind of is. And I'll tell you more about that when we get to batteries and stuff. But yeah, if you're getting into that 2000 plus 2000 watt RMS range plus, you probably want to start thinking about buying a new alternator. There's 3 companies that I really like when it comes to buying new alternators. The company I went with, and I got recommended through Digital Designs in Williston, was Alternators, and they got me a 300 amp alternator for my V6 Mustang. I could have got a bigger one from MechMan, but it was a lot more expensive, and I could have got a really cool custom painted one from Singer Audio. But I had a hard time kind of getting a hold of them. They sent me a quote, and then when I actually tried to call them and talk to about it, they weren't really easy to get a hold of. So I went with Alternators, really easy, really simple. They tell you what you need, tell you what they can get, and they hooked me up for fairly cheap. I think it was $400 for a 300 amp alternator, and I actually burnt it out in the first week of owning it because the person that I had install it didn't quite get the positive terminal tight enough, and it was loose, and the poor connection caused a lot of heat, and it burnt the alternator out. And I called them up, and I'm like, yo, my alternator's dead, I don't know what happened, I thought it'd be fine. And they're like, is it rubbing? I'm like, looked at my cables, there's no dust from the cables rubbing. I'm like, no. And they're like, all right, send it in, we'll check it out. They looked at it, they're like, we know it wasn't your fault, we're gonna fix it, we're gonna send you a new one, just pay shipping, don't worry about it. Second one worked like a charm, kept it in, still in my car, ran really well, really awesome company to work with. And yeah, MechMan has probably the biggest amps out there, biggest alternators out there that have the most amps for your vehicle. Really good company. When I called them, not the best customer support, but I mean, hey, they have a good product. I've seen plenty of people use them, even for not car audio, so good company. And yeah, Singer, other than being kind of hard to get hold of, makes really good stuff. A little expensive, but I mean, if you're paying for custom paint and stuff, it's really worth it. But getting a new alternator can help out a lot, just because it sends more amps through your line. More amps equals more voltage and amps equals more power, and your whole car is going to have more power going through the system. Your lights won't dim as much, and it'll be a lot more helpful than just running your stock alternator where your car is barely getting enough juice. You're probably going to burn it out anyways because it's going to be trying to put out that much power because that's what your system's calling for, and it can't provide that. The other thing is, if your amp doesn't have enough if your alternator doesn't have enough amps going to your actual amp in the back, your amplifier, it won't get the true RMS reading. Say you got like a Hyphonics Brutus that's 2400 watts RMS, and your amp's not putting out enough power, it's going to cause voltage drops in your system, and it's going to cause wear on your amp. Your amp's not going to be putting out the true 2400 watts RMS, and it's going to be a big issue. And that's one reason why you should look at upgrading your alternator. I know it's a big cost, it's something you don't want to do, but it'll make your system slightly louder and it'll make it last longer. You don't need to buy stuff won't be breaking, and everything will work exactly how it's supposed to. But now that we're done with amplifiers, we're going to talk about batteries and how batteries can be really helpful for your system, so let's get into that. Alright, so you're getting a battery for your car, you're thinking about getting a battery for a car, you're kind of at that point where you're sitting there and all of a sudden you realize your lights are dimming a little bit, and you're like, oh no, is that a bad thing? How can I fix that? Well, the thing is, it's not a terrible thing. Honestly, it's probably just because your whole system's not getting enough power and your alternator's not putting out quite enough juice, and it's probably going to take forever to kill it. But if it bugs you enough and maybe your lights are dimming a ton, getting a new battery is a nice quick solution for that. And if your lights are just barely dimming and you don't want to spend a lot of money, you can get a cheap battery, and it's going to be just as good as most of the big car audio brands. The only thing is, if you get a cheap battery, you probably want to make sure it's leak proof if it's going inside your vehicle, like inside your trunk, inside your cab somewhere, you're hiding it under a seat, anything like that. You should definitely make sure it's leak proof, because if it's not, it's probably going to spill some acid once in a while, and it's going to corrode carpet, corrode metal, and it's just a mess, and you really shouldn't deal with it. One of the reasons I don't recommend capacitors is that are just meant for like one quick boost of juice to your amp, and then they need to be charged back up, and then they wait for the next big push a juice through your system. And there's a lot of misconceptions, like farads are how much power it has. That's not true at all. You can get 1,000 farad capacitor that's the size of my thumb. A lot of it, how much power they store, is how big the cell is, and there's tons of things that go into it that I'm not getting into with capacitors, because the reason I don't like them is if your system's calling for power nonstop, your system's actually getting held back because it's trying to power up that capacitor that's feeding your amp before it's actually feeding directly in your amp. Where if you have a battery, it's taking directly from those batteries and going straight to your amplifier. And those batteries are the juice that goes through all your car. But the thing is, having a lot of batteries can actually make up for not having that big of an alternator. So, like I said, a lot of people are saying that I need 1 amp from my alternator for every 10 watts that my amp calls for. So, the kind of way around that is having a lot of battery storage. Because the thing is, your amplifier, even if it's playing hard, isn't going to be calling for that full power all the time when it's on. And your alternator will feed power into your batteries, and that will be how it gets its power. And the thing is, the more battery bank you have, the more power that's stored, and your alternator is always going to be giving as much juice as it can to those batteries. So unless they get completely drained out, your alternator is not going to be working any harder than normal, even if you're playing your subs loud as possible. Now mind you, if you do it for an extended period of time, those batteries will drain, your alternator will be working harder than normal. Now, there are 2 kinds of batteries, and they both kind of have their perks and all that fun stuff. First is lead-acid batteries, and they're the ones I use because they're cheaper. And I actually had an XS7500D, and they say the numbers are for how much wattage they can take. So the 7500's good for 7500 watts. I had to run 2 of them on my 6500 watt system, so I mean, some of them might be true to what they say, some might not be. I think the XS7500Ds or D7500s are not quite true to that, but they're still really good batteries and they're cheap for what they put out. I think I paid $500 for mine and $500 for my 2, and they held up pretty good for a long time. They did, really well. And then there's North Star, which is pretty cool. They do a tall, skinny, kind of long battery, but if you need a lot of space from side to side, this is a really good fit for most vehicles, and they put out a great amount of power, and they have a good rebounds if they get drained too much. Really good battery. And then Kinetic is kind of like the go-to car audio battery for a long time. They make really good stuff. And the other kind of battery, which is kind of a newer battery, is a lithium powered battery. And these are awesome because there's no acid, so you can put them anywhere and it's not going to be a problem. The only thing is they can be dangerous if you get in a wreck, because lithium batteries, once they get exposed to air, that core begins to oxidize rapidly, catches on fire, and explodes. So if you have a huge lithium bank, that could be kind of dangerous, but as long as nothing bad happens, those batteries are probably your best option. They're more expensive, but my lead acid battery that was good for 6,500 watts or 7,500 watts weighed 105 pounds. Now, a lithium battery of the same magnitude weighs about 15 pounds. So if you're worried about putting too much weight in your trunk or just weight in your vehicle in general, lithium batteries are definitely the way to go, and are far superior in holding power in pretty much every way and form. But again, they're really expensive, because also a 7,500 watt RMS lithium battery is going to run you about $1,100 to $1,200, so almost double the price of a typical lead acid battery. So I mean, pros and cons, and there's tons of new brands out there. I'll try to link as many as I can in the description. But there's the Megalith lithium batteries, Juicebox, and a couple others, Limitless Power. And those are all really good batteries, really good companies, and they'll get done anything you need. And the thing is, I think Limitless has a 15,000 watt rated battery, and that's just a single battery. So instead of running like 10 XS7500Ds, you can run one of these big ass lithium batteries. But yeah, so that's kind of what batteries do. The other things you can think of that kind of help out your electrical is you kind of want to ground all your grounds to one location so you don't get ground loops and all that other fun stuff. But yeah, that's it for batteries. So, thanks for watching, everyone. I've got a lot of support on my other videos and a lot of comments, some good, some not so great. And I had fun reading all of them, even the roasts about my wonderful hairline. But I'm gonna read my top favorite roast comments. So here we go, let's get into it. How does Walmart Jim Carrey know about subwoofers? LeBron hairline.
Me compared to the king? Alright.
Dude, show some respect and take your hat off when you live at your mama's house. I'm sure heat bill is
Pretty
paid.
cold in here, man. I don't know.
Pinky and the brain? Need an amp for that hairline.
If that's a thing, I want it.
Next time, talk about the most 10 powerful shampoos for your hair.
Hi, EDB here with the 10 most powerful shampoos. Oh, shit.
Just knowing this guy has frozen dicks in his freezer and bodies buried under his house.
How did you know?